She arrived alone, no rank displayed, no name given, no explanation offered. Just a worn rifle case and hands that wouldn't stop shaking. The elite unit laughed. They bet $1. Zero, she wouldn't even hit the paper. 7 seconds later, a candle flame, 2,650 meters away, was gone. So, who was she? And why did a classified scar on her arm make the colonel go pale and silent? Before we begin, tell me, where are you watching this from? And what's the most powerful story of redemption you've ever seen or felt? Welcome to Heart Listens Stories, where tales of compassion and kindness are told. Let's uncover what really happened. The wind moved like a whisper across the Arizona desert, hot and erratic, dragging ripples through the dust fields surrounding Fort Talon. The sun sat high and cruel, casting a sharp white glare over the range where heat waves danced above cracked soil. The digital thermometer mounted to the range post blinked 92F. Jocelyn Hart didn't flinch as she lowered herself onto the firing mat. Her knees settled slow, deliberate, like she had done this 1,000 times before. Only now every eye was on her. Behind her, the elite of Viper unit stood in a loose semicircle, their shadows long, their stares longer. Most didn't speak. They didn't need to. The mockery had already been loud enough. She adjusted her prone position with precision, even as her hands betrayed her, trembling faintly, subtly, but unmistakably. 3 years of damage couldn't be undone by posture. But her gaze unshaken, cold, direct, like stone beneath cracking glass. The rifle beside her was a contradiction in metal, a sleek, matte black long-range custom, but with a strange modular attachment clumped beneath the handguard. It didn't look like anything military issued. The exposed sensor nodes pulsed faint blue as it calibrated. One operator had called it a space parasite. Another, more honest, had just asked if it was even legal. Hart didn't reply to any of them. She unfolded the bipod, set the rifle down, and rolled her left wrist slightly to read the wind. The red nylon of the wind streamer twisted sharply 8 miles per hour, shifting southwest, unpredictable, already changing. She had minutes, maybe less, 250 meters behind the ridge. A candle flame danced quietly, lit less than 5 minutes ago by a range assistant sent by Vickers himself. One shot, he'd said, smirking, extinguished the flame at 2,650 meters. No damage to the wax. Bet 1,000 she can't even see it, let alone hit it. Hart hadn't answered. She just nodded once. Now, as her cheek settled against the stock, the external world narrowed to a thin field of focus. The sand, the men, the sun gone. It was just her, the scope, and that faint flicker of orange against a distant pale backdrop. She exhaled. The wind picked up. Her hands trembled, not violently, but enough. Enough to have ended a lesser career, and in fact, it had nearly ended hers. The rifle began to hum softly. The adaptive device her prototype compensated in real time, sensing every micro-tremor through gyroscopic feedback, balancing it through predictive alignment. A countdown ticked silently in her mind. Barometric pressure unstable. Crosswind building. She made her final correction with a half-turn of the turret left 0.8 mils down to. The glass shimmered, but the flame remained centered. She blinked once, then fired. The suppressor coughed. No thunder, no recoil. Just the hiss of air being torn apart by tungsten. And a moment later, silence, absolute. Uncanny silence. No reaction, no sound. Then, 7.4 seconds later, the flicker vanished not. Flickered, not wavered, gone. The candle remained bright, the wax unbroken, but the flame had ceased to exist. Like someone had reached across the world and pinched it between two fingers. No one spoke. Sergeant Raiden Holt was the first to move. His binoculars dropped too. The dirt, forgotten. Master Sergeant Trent Vickers stood motionless, one hand still frozen mid-fold. The crumpled $1,000 bill stuck between his knuckles. Specialist Molly Akeen's jaw parted just slightly, her eyes scanning the far ridge. Then Jocelyn. Then back again. Even Colonel Barrett Wynne, who had remained aloof, arms crossed behind the line, took 2 steps forward, his boots crunching softly. In the dirt, that's someone began, but the sentence didn't finish. Holt exhaled. That's not possible. The wind shifted again, kicking dust across the line. No one noticed. All eyes stayed fixed on the woman still lying prone behind the rifle. Her cheek still rested on the stock. Her hands still trembled even now, but her eyes still cold, still focused, still waiting for doubt to catch up to fact. Colonel Wynne broke the stillness. "Who the hell?" he murmured, just loud enough for Keen to hear. "Is she?" Hart finally sat up slowly. No theatrics, no smile. She disengaged the rifle's magazine, cleared the chamber, then reached for the adaptive module and began uncoupling it wire by wire. Each movement was delicate, efficient, controlled. Vickers still hadn't spoken. Behind him, a few other operators began shifting awkwardly. A joke died on someone's tongue. Another cleared his throat and turned away, unsure what to do with the moment. It had taken less than 10 seconds to undo an entire morning's worth of arrogance. Keen took a hesitant step forward. She watched Jocelyn's sleeve ride up slightly as she reached for her tools. For a second, she saw something beneath the fabric faint, etched into the skin, not tattooed. A shape, a symbol, something she had only seen once before. Deep in a file she wasn't supposed to access, her pulse quickened. Before she could say anything, Colonel Wynne called out, "Lieutenant Colonel Hart." Everyone turned. The rank alone knocked the breath out of half the group. Wynne approached, slower this time, voice measured. "You were never here to observe." Hart stood, still no explanation. Just a quiet nod and the same steel gaze. Wynne looked toward the candle. At the edge of the range, still upright, still untouched, but its flame gone like the doubt in every man standing there. He let out a long breath. "I think we need to talk." Hart simply picked up her case. The adaptive device hummed in her hand, then dimmed, and behind her, for the first time, Viper unit stayed silent. The sun wasn't yet brutal that morning, but the desert heat already pulsed faintly off the concrete. When the dust trail began to rise in the distance, Fort Talon's security cameras picked up the unmarked sedan before Anyone on the range did. Its windows were tinted, the paint dull with age, tires throwing fine grit into the air as it rolled to a stop outside the main checkpoint. Specialist Molly Keene was the first to speak. "We expecting visitors?" she asked without looking up from her spotoscope. "Not on the schedule." Sergeant First Class Raiden Holt muttered. "Probably another suit from DARPA come to observe and write a report they don't understand." When the car door opened, no one moved at first. Then she stepped out. Lieutenant Colonel Jocelyn Hart looked like a civilian professor who'd taken a wrong turn on the way to a university conference. Loose gray slacks, button-down shirt half-tucked, boots, too worn for fashion but too new for comfort. Her graying hair was tied back with a rubber band, and her left hand trembled visibly as she reached into the passenger seat for a long wooden case. "Jesus," someone behind Holt murmured. "She's shaking already." Colonel Barrett Wynne exited the command post with a clipboard in hand. His expression soured the moment he saw her. He didn't extend a hand. "This is the DARPA rep," he announced, loud enough for Viper Unit to hear. "She'll be observing. No questions, no introductions. Let her do her thing." He didn't even use her name. Jocelyn signed the visitor log slowly, carefully, like someone trying not to spill ink with each tremor. A few soldiers near the benches exchanged glances. Holt leaned over to Master Sergeant Trent Vickers and whispered, "You sure this isn't a mistake? Maybe she's the janitor." Vickers cracked a grin and pulled out a worn $1,000 bill, creased from years of hiding in his boot. He slapped it down on the table behind them. "Bet she can't even hold that rifle straight, let alone shoot it." Half the team laughed. Someone whistled. "Make it 2,000 if she manages to lift it without dropping something." Jocelyn walked toward the far end of the range without reacting. She reached the empty bench furthest from the others and placed her case down with slow, methodical care. Every movement was precise, but not smooth. Her hands betrayed her before anything else could. When she popped the latches open, the laughter behind her intensified. "What is that thing?" one of the younger operators snorted. "Looks like a museum piece." "No, man," Holt said louder. "That's DARPA's newest anti-shake model. Works great for latte stirring." Vickers leaned in closer, watching her begin to assemble the rifle. His smirk widened as she dropped a small adjustment tool onto the concrete. The metallic clink echoed louder than it should have. She bent to retrieve it, hands shaking again. "Need help with that, ma'am?" Vickers called, voice syrupy and fake. "Wouldn't want you to void the warranty on that antique." Jocelyn didn't look up. "No, thank you," she said simply, her voice even and quiet. Keen, meanwhile, hadn't joined the chorus. She was squinting, not through a scope, but at Jocelyn's forearm, where the shirt sleeve had ridden up just an inch. As she adjusted the scope, a faint mark flashed, something not quite tattoo and not quite scar. It looked branded, symmetrical, unusual. She narrowed her eyes. "Does DARPA even let civilians touch live rounds now?" someone asked. "Nope," Holt replied. "But maybe she's here to teach us about posture or library organization." More laughter. Jocelyn ignored it all. She loaded a single round custom from a box she'd brought herself, then settled behind the rifle. The prototype device clamped beneath the chassis began to hum faintly. Nothing visible, just a low harmonic buzz only. Those closest could sense. "Get the candle," Vickers called to one of the techs. "Far ridge. One flame, one shot. Let's make this interesting." The digital rangefinder blinked to 1,650 meters. Jocelyn didn't blink. She adjusted her scope, but her left hand twitched again, sending the reticle to far left. She reset, tried again, missed the alignment. From behind, someone murmured, "She's not going to make it past calibration. She's shaking like she's got a personal earthquake." Holt added. Keen watched closely. This wasn't just nerves. This was something else, something practiced. A rhythm, as if heart was timing her adjustments. Between each tremor, the first shot went wide. The suppressor hissed. The bullet sailed harmlessly past the ridge. Nowhere near the flame. Holt didn't even try to hide his snort. "I knew it," he said. Folding his arms, Vickers raised his eyebrows, glancing toward Colonel Wynne, who remained stone-faced. Jocelyn said nothing. She stayed prone. Her right eye blinked once, slow and measured. Then she began adjusting the rifle again, not the scope this time, but the prototype module beneath it. The hum changed pitch. She reached into a side pouch and withdrew a small cable, plugging it into a slot just above the trigger guard. The device responded instantly, recalibrating itself. "What's she doing?" someone whispered. "Probably rebooting her confidence." "No, seriously," another said, leaning forward. "That's not standard DARPA gear. I've never seen that interface before." Keen stepped a few feet closer, still watching her hands, still watching the tremors. Jocelyn lifted the bolt, reset the chamber, and loaded a second round. This time, she adjusted her breathing to seconds in, 3 seconds out. She sensed the recoil management system to her heart rate. The hum dropped to almost nothing. And then, just when Vickers opened his mouth to speak, she fired again. No one laughed. The shot didn't hit the candle, but it was close, too close. "Wait a damn minute," Holt muttered, picking up his binoculars again. She corrected for wind. Keen said under her breath, "On the fly." Behind them, even Colonel Wynne had moved a step closer. Jocelyn exhaled once more, then rose from the mat. She didn't look around. She just walked back toward her case and began packing up. Keen's eyes never left her. Neither did the doubt that had suddenly crept into every operator's mind. No one spoke for a full 30 seconds. Then Holt asked the question they were all thinking. Where the hell did she learn to shoot like that? And this time, no one laughed. Before the tremors, before the scar, before the whispers behind her back, there was dryline. Northern Syria, 0300 hours, windless, dead quiet. A 3-story apartment block stood silhouetted against a sky lit only by starlight. The hostage was inside, taped to a chair, one hand duct taped to his chest, the other pointing at a window. A human decoy to draw fire. Then Major Jocelyn Hart was prone on a ridge 1,800 meters away. She'd been there for 11 minutes, heartbeat steady at 58. Her target was behind triple-pane glass, obscured by curtains that moved just enough to hint at motion. She had a 3-second window to take the shot, miss, and 7 people died. Hit the wrong man, and the hostage was gone. Wait too long, and the bomb vest might go off. She didn't blink. Her spotter whispered, "Green in 5. Jocelyn adjusted her cheek weld, pulled her breath in through her nose, then paused at the exact midpoint between inhale and exhale. 2, 1. The rifle kicked back with a muffled thunder. Through the scope, the curtains fluttered once. A faint mist bloomed against the far wall. Then silence. Radio crackled. Target down. Hostage secured. All 7 alive. They didn't cheer. They never did. But in the dark silence, someone muttered over comms. Ghost line. The name stuck. Even years later, that was the shot they remembered. But not the one that ended everything. Altered came later, a border town in northern Africa. Mostly sand and cement, where intelligence pointed to a chemical facility hidden beneath a grain depot. Hart, by then team lead on a joint Delta CIA operation, led a squad of 6 into the compound. The threat wasn't kinetic, it was synthetic. Inside, the corridors were damp, the air thick with ammonia. They found the lab 3 floors underground, no enemy soldiers, just rows of sealed drums and a set of gas lines someone had sabotaged, already leaking. Then came the alarm containment breach. One of her men panicked and tried to run. Jocelyn didn't. She sealed the lab door from the inside, radioed the team, "Climb. Go now. I'll secure the vent." They screamed. She didn't answer again. She found the valve halfway up the crawl duct. The air was already turning metallic, hard to breathe. She held her breath, closed the lock manually, then jammed a spike into the release, pipe to freeze the pressure. Then she passed out. When she woke up 3 hours later, she was in a French military field hospital just beyond the Libyan borders, blood in her nose, her hands twitching in small, rhythmic pulses. Doctors gave her 6 months, maybe 9. The tremors would get worse. No cure, no nerve repair possible. Only adaptation. "You're not a sniper anymore," one of them told her gently. "You're lucky to write your name." She remembered smiling faintly. Good thing I already know it. The tremors didn't take her all at once. They crept in like fog, first when zipping up a jacket, then when holding coffee, then when clicking a mouse. The rifle was last. When her unit returned stateside, she met them at Andrews in dress uniform. Not one of them made eye contact. She heard one call her a ghost, not out of reverence this time, but like something that didn't belong. That night, in her quarters, she opened her gun case. Her fingers couldn't hold the bolt steady, so she built something that could. The first prototype was ugly wires exposed, battery packs duct-taped to the stock. It overcorrected and jerked like a nervous animal, but it compensated for the tremor, at least a little. She tested it alone in a private range outside Tucson, paid for with her pension. Every shot was logged, every variable wind, humidity, heart rate, tremor intensity tracked. For months, The results were inconclusive. Some days it worked, others, the barrel drifted off axis by inches. But Jocelyn kept going. She'd never been motivated by revenge, not by proving anyone wrong, only by a quiet, obsessive question. What if there's still a way? She reached out to DARPA anonymously, pitched the concept as a cognitive motor interface to restore precision in operators affected by combat injuries. She left out her background, let the data speak. 3 months later, a rep emailed back, promising but unverified. No operational testing. No unit wanted it. No one wanted her. So she volunteered herself as test subject, courier, engineer, and shooter. That's how she ended up at Fort Talon with a case, a scar, and no introduction. No one there had ever heard of Dryline. They only saw her tremble. They didn't know the second shot, the one that saved her team, had also broken her. They didn't see the weeks in the hospital bed, mapping tremor patterns on graph paper with a stylus strapped to her wrist. They didn't see the notebooks, the hours spent syncing muscle memory with machine logic, the night she woke to find her finger still twitching in her sleep. But they would see the result. She would make sure of that dot at the edge of Fort Talon's range. The candle flame still flickered. Her hands still shook. But now they understood. The tremor didn't stop her, it defined her. And if she could shoot through triple glass to save a hostage, if she could hold the line alone in a chemical hell, then she could do this, too. The rifle wasn't her crutch. It was her signature. The silence after the shot lasted longer than anyone expected. Colonel Wynne didn't speak. Neither did Vickers. Holt still had the binoculars in his hands. But he wasn't looking through them anymore. He was just staring at Jocelyn Hart like he was seeing her. For the first time, it was Specialist Molly Keene who moved first. She stepped forward without a word, her gaze steady. Jocelyn was coiling a cable from the adaptive module, her hands still trembling faintly. Keene gently reached for her sleeve. Jocelyn paused but didn't resist. Keene pulled the fabric back, just enough to expose the inside of Jocelyn's forearm. The scar was there raised, pale, and unmistakably deliberate. Not a tattoo, not an accident. A brand, geometric in design, embedded with microscopic inking only visible at certain angles. A silent signature of a program most had only heard of in classified rumor. Keene exhaled. Night wind. Colonel Wynne's face changed. He stepped forward slowly, eyes fixed on the mark. That's not just a DARPA observer, he said, voice tight. That's Latham, Colonel Jocelyn Hart. A sharp intake of breath rippled through the group. Wynne turned toward the others. Former Delta. 42 missions, 37 confirmed shots over 2,000 meters. Recipient of the Distinguished Service Cross. He paused and presumed retired after Altib. No one said a word. Vickers lowered his head, glancing at his own hands. He flexed his fingers once. The tremble was subtle, but present. His jaw tightened. No more jokes. 3 days later, Fort Talon was locked down under a black flag directive. Viper Unit was ordered to prep for rapid deployment. No press, no paperwork. The briefing room buzzed with controlled urgency as Jocelyn stood beside Colonel Wynne at the front console. The room fell silent as the first slide appeared on screen, a grainy surveillance photo of a man in desert clothing flanked by armed guards. Dr. Nassim Farouk, Jocelyn said, former chemical weapons specialist for the Syrian regime. Now operating independently, she tapped the screen, switching to a second image, several barrels marked with radiation and biohazard symbols. This is the man responsible for the agent that damaged my nervous system 3 years ago in Altib. A low murmur moved through the room. Keen's eyes narrowed. Vickers sat forward in his seat, elbows on his knees. Jocelyn continued. Intel suggests Farouk has refined the compound, faster onset, broader absorption, potential for mass deployment. The mission was simple: breach a facility on the edge of Tunisia's southern desert, capture Farouk alive, and extract all research materials. But nothing went according to plan. They dropped in under full blackout. Viper unit moved with mechanical precision, their boots silent on sand, weapons tight to their chests. Overwatch was maintained by drone. Jocelyn monitored from the Tactical Operations Center in a secured bunker, 60 miles away. All comms were routed through her. Building perimeter secured. Holt whispered through comms. No movement. Proceed, Jocelyn replied. Remember, priority is containment and live capture. Inside the compound, the layout was eerily familiar: concrete halls, cold air ducts, lab doors sealed with digital locks. Everything reminded her of Altib: the smell, the sterile hum. But this time, she wasn't inside. She was watching. Vickers breached the main lab door. Cameras streamed back through his helmet feed. What they found was worse than expected. Empty chambers, bins full of broken canisters, a laptop still warm to the touch, and in the center of the room, a single vial suspended in a stabilization rig. Trap, Jocelyn muttered. Get out now. But it was too late. The sensors screamed. First alarm beeps echoing through the talk. Jocelyn's monitor lit red. Airborne contaminant detected. The system flashed inside the compound. Keen froze. Ma'am, I've got a sharp taste in my mouth, she said. Then Vickers dropped to one knee, hand pressed to the wall for balance. My hand. Something's wrong. The agent had already been released, and this time, it wasn't just inhaled, it was absorbed. Jocelyn's fingers moved faster than they had in years. She initiated countermeasure protocols, rerouted filters, activated the on-board scrubbing systems in each operator's suit. But her gut knew this wasn't the same toxin. It was worse. Inside the lab, Holt fumbled with his rifle. It clattered to the floor. I can't grip, he hissed. I can't. Emergency evac, Jocelyn ordered. Drone extraction inbound. Keen, guide them out. I can barely see straight, Keen replied, her voice thin. Outside the compound, a secondary signal appeared on drone feed movement from a nearby shack. Change of plan, Jocelyn said. Farouk's not in the lab. He's watching. They found him in a side building, seated calmly at a desk. His hands were folded, no weapons, no panic. You've been breathing it for 7 minutes, Farouk said without emotion. Fascinating, isn't it? This version bypasses all traditional defense measures, absorbs through the skin, targets the cerebellum. Vickers raised his rifle with trembling hands. "Shut up." Jocelyn watched from the feed. Heart pounding. Every second mattered. "Extract now," she said. "Get him out. Leave the site." The helicopter arrived just in time. Every member of Viper unit was showing early-stage tremors just like she had, but accelerated as they lifted off. Farouk seated between them. Jocelyn watched the screen, hands flat on the console. They'd all been poisoned. They were all going to change. Back at Fort Talon, medical teams worked around the clock. Jocelyn stayed between the lab and the medbay, recalibrating every prototype, every sensor, every piece of code. She didn't sleep. She didn't eat. She rebuilt the device from scratch to compensate for the new agent's signature, its sharper onset, its unpredictable waveform. "Will it work?" Wynne asked. "It has to," she said. 2 days later, the test began. Vickers stood on the range, hands shaking. The adaptive rig hummed faintly. He gritted his teeth, lifted the rifle, and fired. Bullseye. Then Holt, then Keen. One by one, they found their balance again, not in their hands, but in what Jocelyn had built. That night, Colonel Wynne brought her a sealed envelope request from the Pentagon, an offer to lead a new division for adaptive combat integration. She held the paper in her hands. It shook just slightly, but her voice was steady. "I'm not done here yet." Because for the first time, her invention wasn't just hers. Now it was theirs. Fort Talon never looked the same again. Viper unit returned under full medical restriction. No formation, no ceremony, just silence and shadowed eyes. Their gait had changed. So had their hands. But their eyes still sharp, still forward, said what no form could record. "We are not done." Neurological scans confirmed it. Permanent tremors, combat-induced, toxin-enhanced, non-reversible. But not disqualifying. Not anymore. Jocelyn Hart stayed. She never left the range. For days on end, she wore the same gray utility shirt. Sleeves rolled, gloves off, notebook in hand. Her fingers trembled the entire time. And yet the calibrations never missed. She sat with Vickers first. His hands couldn't lock the bolt without shaking. He hated showing it, hated more that she saw it. But she didn't flinch. She adjusted the recoil sync on his adaptive module, input a new oscillation map, and tightened the forward stabilizer by a single notch. "Try now," she said, voice low. He raised the rifle, paused, then fired. Bullseye. His shoulders slumped in disbelief. Then he nodded once, quiet and honest. Next was Keen, then Holt, then the rest of Viper unit. One by one, each operator faced the range again, not to prove they could win, but to prove they could still stand. And one by one, they fired. Some missed the first shot, some didn't. But every bullet told the same story. Their hands were damaged, but their capability was not. 3 weeks later, Pentagon observers flew in suits, staff officers, scientists who had doubted the project from the beginning. Jocelyn met them with clipped greetings and zero theatrics. She let the data speak. They watched Holt group 3 rounds into a quarter-inch circle at 900 meters. They watched Keen hit a moving target at 1,100 using one of Jocelyn's revised gyroscopic mounts. But what made the room go still was Vickers. His tremor had worsened after the mission more than anyone. They said he wouldn't shoot again. He proved them wrong at 2,000 meters. The brass signed off on the program that same evening. Jocelyn was offered a post in Virginia's Strategic Development Lead, oversight of adaptive tech for all special operations units, labs, teams, budget. She accepted, but on one condition. Viper unit came with her, not as subjects, she clarified, but as instructors. They weren't just users, they were pioneers, proof that adaptation was not an excuse, but a new standard. The next morning, before departure orders were finalized, Holt found Jocelyn out at the far range. The sun was low, wind light, sky wide open. He brought a small, weathered photo in his hand. "Wanted to show you this," he said, voice gruff. Jocelyn took it gently. Two men, both in uniform. One clearly younger than Holt, but with the same jawline, same eyes. They stood side by side, rifles slung, laughing about something lost to time. "My brother, Dean," Holt said. "Force Recon, Sniper School." She nodded, waited. He started shaking after Kandahar. Couldn't hold his weapon straight. They benched him, told him he was done. Jocelyn's hand tightened slightly around the photo. He took his own life 11 months later. The silence between them was heavy, but not empty. Holt exhaled. "This thing you made, it's too late for him, but it won't be too late for the next guy." Jocelyn returned the photo carefully. Then she looked out over the field, past the paper targets, past the berm, to the candle. It stood at 2,650 meters, not lit, just there, waiting. Jocelyn walked to the firing line, Vickers and Keen trailing behind her. Holt followed, silent. She didn't bring a team this time, no briefing, no helmet, just her and the prototype. As she lay prone, Keen placed a fresh target just above the candle. "Test calibration?" she asked. Jocelyn shook her head. "No ritual." She loaded a single round. Her hands trembled like always. But the device compensated like always. The wind shifted, and Jocelyn exhaled. The suppressor whispered. The candle flickered once. Then nothing. Keen raised the scope, smiled. "Direct hit. No damage. Just the flame gone again." Later that day, the team stood at Fort Talon's memorial wall granite slabs, smooth and cold, etched with names from every conflict since the base's founding. Holt approached the wall alone, pulled something from his vest. He placed the photo of his brother, now sealed in glass, on the base of the stone. He didn't say anything, just stepped back. Jocelyn joined him. They stood there for a moment, side by side, as wind stirred faintly behind them. "This wall used to mean finished," Holt murmured. "But not for us, not anymore." Jocelyn nodded once. Then she looked toward the far end of the range. Someone, maybe a tech, maybe a student, had placed a candle out there again. Not for testing, not for drama, just there. She stared at it for a while, then said, more to herself than anyone else, "We don't need steady hands." A pause, just the will to aim again. and no one disagreed.